So, one of the most miserable and pervasive myths that Russia tries to propagate on the world is that Ukraine is not its own nation. They're going to talk about this through the eyes of an international expert who is going to make that kind of claim and charge two American women with propagating that myth, even though it's decades after Ukraine had independence or initially before World War II. So we're going to watch this in the Russian media monitor. Special thanks, as always, to the Russian media monitor. They do great work unpacking this from Russian state TV. Go ahead, Marina. Let's continue to discuss Donald Trump's fiery speech. As the former president and a candidate for U.S. president, I was stunned by his phrase, Ukraine no longer exists. I can reference earlier literary classics, namely Gogol, where it's explained in simple terms. Yeah, the Russians love Gogol because he kind of makes Russia the center of everything and elevates its importance. So, of course, they're going to really enjoy him. Then Ukraine never existed to begin with. Well, yeah, but they did exist, and they were independent at some point before the Soviets came and took away that independence. These were Russian people. No, they weren't. They're different. They're different in language. They're different, even slightly different genetically. Who were suddenly persuaded that they are Ukrainians. We know how it ended through Taras Bulba and other classic literary works. There are certain people who are to blame for what happened to Ukraine in the last 30 years. These people live in the United States of America. These are women. One of them is Sovietologist Condoleezza Rice. Now, if you don't know who Condoleezza Rice is, she was the former national security advisor under George W. Bush and Secretary of State in his administration. Okay, one of these is Sovietologist Condoleezza Rice. There is no Sovietology among U.S. scientists. No, there are historians and international relations experts who study the Soviets and now study Russia. But there is a Sovietologist, which is her. And then there is her female friend, Victoria Nuland. To a significant degree, these women influenced the formation of Ukraine as a project. To blame them for Ukraine being its own nation, that's absurd. When Ukrainians have claimed that they have been their own independent people for many, many years, well before Condoleezza Rice and Victoria Nuland even knew where Ukraine was on a map, which is anti-Russia. But this is a project designed to destroy our country. Well, what you're doing is destroying your country, but that's a project of your making in Russia. It's very clear now, 20 to 30 years later, currently, Ukraine doesn't look like a nation. What this regime is currently doing is systematically destroying its own population. Let's stop there. No, the Ukrainians are not systematically destroying its own population. The Russians are systematically destroying Ukrainian population and a good fraction of their own population at the same time. I specialize in international relations. I can't call it anything other than genocide. Well, I agree with her. What the Russians are doing to Ukrainians is genocide, but that's not what she's saying. Switzerland, that is trying to recognize Holodomor, should instead pay attention to this. No, full stop. Switzerland is right to recognize the Holodomor. In the Holodomor, the Russians, well, the Soviets, which were led by Russia, destroyed huge numbers of Ukrainian citizens by taking their grain and making them starve. Like, that was genocide. And they should be recognizing that that was genocide. Unless you recognize it, this kind of thing repeats. So that's the way that they frame what is happening in Ukraine. That's all that I wanted to show you, that they're blaming it on a couple of American women for creating Ukraine when Ukraine, like, they're denying facts left and right. And they're saying that Ukraine is creating genocide on its own people when it's the Russians doing it. Come on. Okay, tell me what you thought about this. This helps you, every time I highlight these, it'll help you understand a little bit more about how Russians think and what they're trying to project on Russian state TV. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.